Alabama Public Television Studios in downtown Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Big news this week here in the capital city. Alabama lawmakers got their first peek at what the proposed new State House will look like. Architectural renderings of the legislative chambers, committee rooms, and office space was released by the Legislative Council, along with a conceptual aerial view of how the building will fit into the Capitol complex. Here's that aerial view where you can see the new building will be located behind the current State House, which will be demolished and replaced with green space. Ripley Street in front of the new building will be closed off and a roundabout installed for pickup and drop-off. Here's a look at the second level of the building, which will house the committee rooms. The current State House has very limited committee space, making it difficult for the public to attend and participate in legislative proceedings. The goal is to remedy that with large meeting rooms similar to those in Congress. And here you see level 5 of the building where the legislative chambers will be located. The House and the Senate will face each other, much like in the old Capitol building. Galleries will surround the chambers, much like in Congress. It's important to note that this is not a done deal. The Legislative Council has allowed staff to negotiate with the retirement systems of Alabama and work with architects on these plans, but the body still must vote on a final plan. There's still no final price tag for the work, which will be financed by RSA. State Representative Chris Pringle told Alabama Daily News that he roughly estimates something in the neighborhood of $450 million. I'll speak with Secretary of the Senate Pat Harris more about the State House project later in the show. A downward trajectory last month for the state's education revenue. Tax revenues into the Education Trust Fund were down 13.8% in October compared to that period last year. But officials say the decreases shouldn't cause alarm. Chief Budget Officer Kirk Fulford said revenues were extraordinarily high over the last 2 years, so high that a return to normal was expected. Also, the 1 cent reduction to the state sales tax on groceries, which goes into the ETF, went into effect in October, which could also partially explain the dip. State officials say they expect the legislature to spend around $8.8 billion on education when the session begins in February. Earlier this year, Governor Kay Ivey commissioned a study group to take a look at state agencies, boards, and commissions to find ways to reduce duplication, waste, and inefficiencies inside state government. That commission met this week in the state capitol to present findings on what entities could be consolidated. For example, there are multiple agencies that deal with child welfare that could be merged. The same goes for historical preservation entities. Also discussed was the idea of consolidating some of the myriad occupational licensing boards that have frustrated state lawmakers recently. State Treasurer Young Booser chairs the study group.
I'm happy to say that we have acted and worked efficiently because this is due in December the 15th, but we are delivering it here on November the 8th. We've also identified that there are longer-term issues that need to be addressed, that may need to be addressed by legislation or maybe need to be addressed at a later date.
So, and the purpose of our subcommittee was to make sure and identify these ways, maybe look at things that we've been doing and is there a better way to do those, look at other organizations and other entities, how are they doing it now? How are they dealing with this issue? So we did a lot of research. Some of our research included going back and looking at the history of the state personnel policy and procedures for hiring, recruiting, promoting employees. So we did a deep dive, really deep dive, like way back to the beginning just about it, of how the merit system started, how the different policies and procedures were put in place, what affected those, and how we got to that point. The other things we did, we looked at some national organizations that represent state entities and how are other states handling this similar issues that we have going on. Also, we looked at, for colleges and universities, how could we partner with them maybe to get a better workforce, a more educated workforce, or possibly recruit through that entity. So those are some of the things we began looking at. As we went through all the research, we found that there were several things that we thought would be a good idea to do. One is to hire an independent outside entity to look into how we do things. What is best practices? What are other entities doing that could make our state the best it can be? Another is to engage in a statewide media campaign to let people know about state employees. I'm a lifetime state employee, just about it. I have a small career before this, but it is such a valuable and rewarding career that we need to let people know how important this career is and what you can get out of this career.
A special panel of lawmakers met this week in the State House to discuss ways the state could help grandparents tasked, sometimes unexpectedly, of raising their grandchildren. According to the group Grand Families, there are nearly 60,000 grandparents in Alabama fully responsible for raising their grandchildren, and nearly 160,000 children living in homes where a relative is head of the household. These situations can present special challenges, especially for those with fixed or low incomes. One proposal floated was using a portion of the state's $270 million opioid settlement money to help subsidize child care.
I think our primary goal that we want to hear from our grandparents raising grandchildren and know what their barriers are, what problems they have that could possibly be removed by public policy, either public policy itself or even legislation that may need to be passed to address some barriers that they have. And as you heard from the meeting, it's a real problem across the state, and I'm blessed with my grandchildren being raised by their parents, but I know that's a real problem for a lot of people. And I worked in senior services. I'm retired from senior services, and I saw it firsthand with a lot of people. So I'm appreciative for all these commission members that's willing to serve, and we're going to do our best to find out some solutions for folks.
Well, this is historical for us. I mean, grandparents have been fighting for this for a long time. I know that I've been fighting for it for the last 7 years that we've had our grandchildren. And so this is just a dream come true for us. So whatever we can get done to help grandparents throughout this state is more than we've got now.
Alabama could be the first state in the nation to execute a death row inmate using nitrogen gas. Governor Kay Ivey this week set a January 25th execution date for Kenneth Eugene Smith, who was one of 2 individuals convicted of a murder-for-hire scheme that killed Elizabeth Sennett in 1988. Smith previously opted for nitrogen hypoxia, which is why the state is moving forward with that method. But his attorneys now are objecting to the execution. Proponents of this execution method say it is a painless way to die, but opponents have likened it to human experimentation. The Alabama Supreme Court recently cleared the way for nitrogen hypoxia, but federal appeals are expected. Turning to Washington, U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville continued to face pressure from his Republican colleagues this week over his continued hold on military promotions in protest of the Pentagon's abortion travel policy. In a closed-door meeting of the Senate Republican Caucus, members discussed various ways forward that could allow military promotions to resume. Afterward, Tuberville seemed more willing than ever to compromise.
We talked as a group. There was 49 of us, and it was a well-orchestrated meeting. Everybody had a plan. Everybody that wanted to talk could talk. I obviously started it out, and we went through kind of the timeline of what's going on. I've been challenged on the floor 13 times from Democrats over the last 9 months, spent hours on the floor objecting, and then we had a group of Republicans come in last week and did the same thing. I don't know what they expected. I don't think people have really kept up with this as much as obviously I have, because I've been in the middle of it. But I think now my Republican colleagues kind of understand, what all is going on, because everybody has their jobs to do up here. But we're pretty much all on the same page, but we want a resolution of this. What we don't want to happen is next week, Senator Schumer is going to bring a new resolution to the Rules Committee. And that resolution is we need to be able to bypass any hold that the minority throws at the majority. Now, it has to go through rules, pass there, which it will if it makes it that far, and then it'll have to come to the floor and be voted on. It'll have to be voted on by 60 votes. Do they have 9 votes, which they have to have from the Republicans? I don't know. I would hope that our Republican colleagues does not give up the little power that we have just because of this. Again, we're fighting for the right things in our party, which is pro-life and the military. I would hate to have to give in to the Democrats. We might as well go home if we give them that, because there will be no challenge whatsoever from the Republican side for the next year and a half if this happens.
U.S. Senator Katie Britt is on tour promoting her new book titled God Calls Us to Do Hard Things, Lessons from the Alabama Wiregrass. Britt made several national media appearances, including CBS Mornings and Fox and Friends. She explained that the book's title actually came from her daughter.
My children are why I am doing this. That's why I'm serving in the United States Senate. That's what pushed me to do this. It's the next generation. And that's what this book is about. My kids, when I tried to tell them, I don't know if I should run, my son set me down first, then followed by my daughter. And when I tried to tell her it was a really hard thing to run for the U.S. Senate, she looked back at me and said, well, Mama, doesn't God call you to do hard things? And I think right now that message is more important than ever. Reaffirming the values that this nation made this nation so great, those of faith, family, and freedom, telling life's lessons. So a lot of times we see the peaks of people's lives, and particularly in a social media era. And I, in this book, talk about my valleys, because I believe that's where God carves you up. And if you were honest about how you got there, you're more prepared to walk forward and to serve His purpose for you. And each of us has a different purpose, but we're called to be in the arena. And it is my hope that this book inspires the young and the young at heart to have a new lease on life and to be engaged, because we need them.
Word is official from the Republican National Committee. Alabama will host the 4th GOP presidential debate. On December 6th in Tuscaloosa, the top candidates, probably not including former President Donald Trump, will mix it up on stage once again. The debate will be moderated by former Fox News host Megyn Kelly and Washington Free Beacon editor Eliana Johnson, and will be broadcast on News Nation. Saturday, November the 11th, is Veterans Day, a special day set aside for Americans to acknowledge and honor the service of those who have served in the armed forces. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott reports on some ways Alabamians are marking the day this year.
Alabama State University is not a military installation, but it plays a big role in preparing some future military leaders. The Air Force ROTC program, based near campus, is preparing new leaders by giving them experience working with seasoned veterans.
The neat thing about this is I get to interact with cadets that want to take that oath and want to serve their country. And so at a certain point, in the standpoint, it's like I'm passing the torch on, and the cadre that I have here, we're all on the same team as far as trying to get them to become leaders of character.
Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Boyer commands this detachment. She's proud of the work done here and prouder of the work done worldwide by those wearing the uniform.
I am just amazed at all of the service members within the Department of Defense who essentially take an oath to defend all of us, to include myself, against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They work holidays. They often sacrifice, time in order to serve this bigger mission for our country.
A 19-year veteran in the United States Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel Boyer says the observance of Veterans Day speaks volumes.
It's really neat that the country takes a knee and recognizes those who serve for their communities, for their states, and for the nation.
This is something new cadets are learning, says Isaiah Payne.
I know what veterans do in this country. I've seen it. I've talked to so many of them, and some of them lay down their lives. So many of them work long hours, hard shifts, jobs that no one else would want to do in the world. So the chance, the opportunity to say thank you to them for everything they've done for our country and for our safety, and just to protect our peace and serve our Constitution, thank you isn't enough. I wish we could do more.
Cadet Colonel Payne says it's inspiring to have that knowledge and experience so close to the younger generation.
One of the things I preach to our young cadets is just all the opportunities we have to speak to high-ranking officers and all the experience they have. They've gone through so much in their careers and seen so many places, so once being able to speak to them every day consistently just is a blessing.
whenever someone says thank you for your service, I always pause and I think, wow, thank you for your support and your trust that we're going to make the right decisions here. I feel very welcomed in this community, especially in Alabama and Montgomery, when folks in the community come up to us and say, oh, wow, thank you.
Lieutenant Colonel Boyer says this pride extends deep in Alabama through several generations.
Yes, giants have gone before me, and some still are in our presence today. But the one thing that is constant is this oath that binds all of us. All service members swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States. So no matter how the world is changing, we as the military, and I'm speaking for myself, we have that oath, that binding element that we all service brothers and sisters.
Being able to say thank you for your service on Veterans Day keeps inspiration going.
It wakes me up, fires me up, and makes me want to come back tomorrow.
For Capital Journal, I'm Randy Scott.
We'll be right back with this week's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Joining me next is Pat Harris, Secretary of the Alabama Senate. Mr. Secretary, thanks for coming on the show.
Appreciate the opportunity, Todd. Look forward to being here.
Big week for you. Big week for everybody in this building because y'all released some of the first architectural renderings of the new State House, the new planned State House. A lot of steps to take, but it was really neat to see those drawings. We showed them earlier. So walk us through, bring us up to speed. Where are we in this process?
Well, where we are now is that we have released a conceptual drawing which has been approved for the design of the building itself. Mm-hmm. This whole process is kind of like putting together Legos that you want to design the outside of the building, and then you know what kind of square footage you need and what space you need on the inside, and now it's a matter of putting those pieces together on the inside of the building so that you can actually build the building and then occupy it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we showed the drawings. Really interesting in that the House and Senate will face each other, right? The chambers will face each other, like in the Capitol.
Just like it has in the other Capitol, the old Capitol.
And, talk about those spaces and what you conceptually went into thinking, what you want those spaces to look like in your conversations with the architect.
Well, of course, we visited other states mm-hmm. to see what they have done and what theirs look like. We, of course, used what we had in the old Capitol. But this new, anyone who's been in this building and has looked at the House of Representatives especially mm-hmm. realizes that there are two large columns, which are support columns in that chamber.
Right.
And the desks are all pushed together and uptight. There's absolutely no room for the members to actually do their work and work in there on the floor. And consequently, a lot of them don't stay in the chamber. Mm-hmm. So the idea, at least for the House chamber, was to increase the size, give the members a little more room to move around so they can conduct their business there. The Senate will be a little bit larger, but years ago we took those support columns out, so we have a little more room. But
because it's at the top of the building.
That's correct. Yeah. It's at the top of the building, and those columns only supported one floor for us, where downstairs they support 3 floors.
Right.
So. But we did increase the size simply because it's more manageable with the members and how they work on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really interesting, and it's not just the chambers, plenty of office space for staff, press. There's a studio for Alabama Public Television. We are very grateful to be included in that, and we're excited about those possibilities. But the question that everybody wants to know is, when will it be complete? What's the move-in expectation?
Well, we'd like to be ready at the beginning of the next quadrennium, and move in the next at the beginning of which would be January of 27. Mm-hmm. And that way you bring in whatever the next body of the legislature is. Hopefully, we would like to be through in 26 so that we would have that summer to coordinate the move in, maybe the takedown of this building, some mm-hmm. of the other aspects that we would do while everyone's really kind of out of town. And then at the beginning of 27, move into the new building.
Mm-hmm. We've talked before about why this is happening, and for those that are in this building or that do work in this building during session, it's pretty obvious. But for some that may not visit the State House, talk about just the problem this building has in terms of age, and why a new State House is such a necessity.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that some of the people have not visited this State House is because it's not functional, and they either can't get in or they haven't had the opportunity because it's the flow of the public in and out of this building is severely restricted. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the 3 or 4 main reasons that you need a new State House, so that people can actually participate and watch government function, either as good or as bad as it may be. You want to be able to be part of it. Mm-hmm. But this building is old. We came here in '85. We've had 3 floods, 2 fires. We're constantly fixing leaks on the ceiling. We had one just this week where it flooded the F&T offices, and then they rechanneled it, and it turned around and flooded the Rules Committee office.
Oh, man.
So those are constant. Water causes mold causes mildew. That's in the walls of this building. So it's just an old, tired building, and that necessitated the need. That, safety, ADA regulations, just the function of government necessitated the need for a new State House.
Mm-hmm. I've heard you talk before about the maintenance costs too. Like all the things you just described requires maintenance, and those costs have really built up over the years. Is that right?
Well, we did a study a few years ago just on bringing this building not even really up to code, but with no cosmetic or increase in size changes. And that price tag was close to in today's dollars would be close to $70 million.
Wow.
So that's amazing.
Just to kind of put a Band-Aid on it.
Just to put a Band-Aid on this building.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping you could walk us through that history. You talked about 1985. They came over from the Capitol as it was being renovated. Talk to us about all that history, how we got to here.
Well, in '85, we decided there was a decision was made to renovate the old Capitol. And in order to renovate the old Capitol, we had to move out. So this was the old highway building here. Mm-hmm. And we renovated this as a temporary location while they renovated the Capitol. Well, when they came over here, they realized that they had a little more room for offices for the members. In the old Capitol, the members didn't have any offices. Mm-hmm. So they had member offices over here. They had a little more room. They could add more committee rooms than they had in the old Capitol. And so they decided to stay. And when they decided to stay here, then they took the old Capitol and made it more of a historical chamber for ceremonial sessions in the old House chamber, and renovated the old Senate chamber to its historical origins.
Mm-hmm. So they didn't want to go back because it was kind of nice in this, what back then was a pretty newly renovated building.
Oh, it was very nice when they came in, but that was in '85, and again, there was really no desire to stay here as long as we've stayed here for 40 years, close to 40 years. And this building has just aged out. Now, there have been other iterations of building a new Capitol. We've had discussions about building in years past about using One Court Square downtown. The city at one time offered to give us that building and use all that property. There's been discussions of building a new building across the back of Jackson Street where Whitechapel Funeral Home was at one time. Mm-hmm. There was discussion of building just an extra wing on the Capitol building, which would go out into that middle parking lot, which you can see on some of the drawings, where that building would just be an annex to the Capitol. All those have been floated and discussed. None of them were workable. All of them were expensive. None of them would have corrected any of the long-range problems that we had. Mm-hmm. And this is just the right place at the right time, and with the help of Dr. Bronner and RSA, we have been able to come up with a solution and move forward with the construction of an entirely new State House.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of RSA and Dr. Bronner, when I talked with Senator Gavan, head of the Legislative Council, he expressed just some comfort level, right? Yeah. Some confidence in working with RSA. I mean, we all know the work they do here in downtown. The state is just used to it. it's a comfort level of just working with him with confidence that they're going to do a top-notch job. Do you think that was a difference maker in terms of building support amongst the legislative leaders and rank and file of supporting this project?
I would hope so. I would think that that had a tremendous, his experience and RSA's experience in building buildings, whether they're the office buildings in downtown Montgomery or the golf facilities that he's built throughout the state, or One Water Street in New York City. He has a tremendous reputation and ability to construct something that's going to last for years and is done the right way.
Yeah.
At a very reasonable cost, I must say.
Well, I'm eager to talk to him about it, but would you say he's excited about this in terms of, I mean, it's a pretty big legacy moment for him.
I would think he would be very excited about it. In our meetings with him early on, and as we kind of put this puzzle together, he always appears very excited, very interested in what's going on. And as anybody who's worked with him knows, that he will be hands-on and not let this just float around and be another project. It will be a serious legacy project for him, I believe.
He probably can watch the construction from his office a few blocks away.
Yeah.
All right, well, I can't let you go without asking the question that all my friends that work in this building want to know, and that's about parking.
Yep.
Obviously, it's going to be a problem because the lot where this new building is going is now a parking lot. So you've got to figure out, between staff, lawmakers, and all that. I know that there was in the drawings some space over by the McDowell Lee parking lot for maybe a deck. How do you balance the need for parking for staff and everybody else, but also not wanting it to be just a really cluttered urban space?
Well, I think that's in the design of the people that RSA works with, and they know what they're doing. There'll be a underground parking deck in the new building, which will probably park about 180, 190 vehicles.
Okay.
One of the things that we're real careful about is making sure that we, instead of being an urban area, that we're able to park those F-250s and big Ford trucks and big Chevrolet trucks and Silverados in a space that's not built for a smaller car. But we'll also add, hopefully, in the overall conception of the campus, which we hope will be the end product of the campus of the Capitol complex, is another garage that will be a 2-story or a 3-story garage, which will house another 300 and maybe 300, 350 parking places.
Okay.
On top of that, what we'd like to do on top of that facility is build a pavilion, which the groups can come, and you're very familiar with the groups that pitch tents in the middle of the Avenue of Flags, or pitch tents, or have receptions, try to have receptions, and they can't do it in this area down there. But to build a pavilion there so that they've got a view of the entire campus of state government.
Interesting. Well, maybe painful in the short term, but it'll be fun to watch it be built. Well, look, we're out of time, but thanks again for coming on the show, and we're going to come back to you for updates as we go forward on the new State House.
Happy to do it. Looking forward to it.
All
Thanks. Right. Thanks, Todd.
We'll be right back.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Joining me next is Kent Davis, Commissioner of the Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs. Commissioner, thanks for coming on Capitol Journal.
Todd, it's great to be back. Thanks so much.
Of course, it's Veterans Day, Saturday.
Right.
So we wanted to have you on looking ahead to that. So much history, so much to talk about in terms of this very special holiday. The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of November, the guns went silent. I love that history. Talk about the history of Veterans Day and why it's so special.
Yeah, right. So there were origins in both World War I and World War II, and a direct tie to Alabama that a lot of people are not familiar with. So you mentioned 11th hour, 11th day of the 11th month. November 11th, 1918, the armistice for World War I was signed. Of course, that was the war that was supposed to end all wars. We know that didn't exactly happen. Right after World War I, that day became known as Armistice Day. And it was to celebrate the end of World War I and celebrate the contributions of veterans from that war. Well, then World War II occurred, and believe it or not, the first celebration of what we call the modern Veterans Day occurred in Birmingham. A World War II veteran, Mr. Raymond Weeks, proposed having a National Veterans Day celebration in Birmingham. So on November 11th, 1947, Birmingham put on a parade. They had guest speakers. General Omar Bradley was the keynote speaker.
Oh, wow.
And a series of events in Birmingham. That was the first official Veterans Day celebration. It just so happened that Raymond Weeks was friends with President Eisenhower when he became president. He had known him during World War II. So eventually in 1954, Congress passed a law that made Veterans Day the replacement of Armistice Day. So November 11th now is permanently Veterans Day to celebrate the contributions of all those who previously served in all wars or even in peacetime. And Mr. Raymond Weeks was eventually recognized in 1982 by President Reagan, who gave him a Presidential Citizens Medal recognizing him basically as the father of Veterans Day. So I can honestly say the roots of the modern Veterans Day were right here in Alabama, and we should be proud of that.
We really should be. And I've been up there a couple of times to the Veterans Day, well, the dinner the night before and then the parade, and it is really something. I mean, it is above and beyond what I ever expected.
It's been a great tradition. I'll be at the dinner this coming week up there right before Veterans Day, and it's a big event to this day.
One thing I like to clarify for folks, especially maybe younger folks, is that this isn't Memorial Day or Armed Services Day. Those are special days, but this is special for veterans, right?
Right, it is. So Veterans Day is set aside, as I said, to celebrate the contributions of all of those who previously served in the military. In May, we have two celebrations. We celebrate Armed Forces Day, which celebrates the active duty military. And then we have Memorial Day celebrating the contributions of those who died in service to their country. So a little distinction there. There are some subtle differences, but it is important to understand those differences.
Absolutely. You know, when I worked in Congress years ago, we worked on a lot of veterans issues. And, you know, there's plenty of work that goes on there. But no matter what the request was or the issue, so many veterans, it seemed to me, this is my observation, a lot of what they wanted was to be acknowledged, to be seen, to have their service to this country acknowledged. So talk about that, the importance of acknowledging that service for all generations of those who've served.
Yeah, most veterans are very proud that they served their country. I really mean that. All over the state of Alabama, when I meet veterans, from World War II veterans to Iraq, Afghanistan veterans, there's a sense of pride and camaraderie that they did serve their country. Most of them don't expect thanks, but it is nice to just say, especially on Veterans Day, thanks for your service. And there are so many events around the state that are going on that regular citizens can participate in. You mentioned the events going on in Birmingham, they're in Mobile, here in Montgomery. They actually started last weekend. The Montgomery Chamber of Commerce had a wonderful Veterans Day celebration. So I would encourage people, attend those and say thanks to a veteran. And we also have a saying, you know, beyond just saying thanks, veterans say, if you really want to thank a veteran, be the kind of citizen who's worth fighting for in this country. And boy, we need that in this country.
Well, yeah, well said. That's something. So you mentioned those events. I know that you participated in this Iron Ruck event. We talked about this before. This is an Auburn, Alabama thing.
It is another great tradition in the state of Alabama. So everybody knows about the Iron Bowl. The week of the Iron Bowl, the Student Veterans Associations at both Auburn and the University of Alabama get together and they conduct a 151-mile ruck march, which is a military term. It's a march with a rucksack on your back between the two campuses, and they deliver the game ball wherever the game is going to be played. And they're going to do that again this year from November 22nd to the 24th. We're doing a series of press conferences to advertise that Operation Iron Ruck. The purpose of Operation Iron Ruck is to raise awareness of the veteran suicide issue and mental health issues for veterans in general. So it's going to happen again this year. I'm going to do the first leg. I'm usually good for about 7 miles, but these kids go out of their way during their vacation time to do this effort to raise awareness. It's a really noble effort.
And these are students who have previously served in the military. So they have already served, and now they're students, maybe a little older than your typical student.
That's exactly right. You do see an age range. You see some who served one term. You see some older guys like me even.
But that's really cool to think about, you know, serving your country maybe out of high school, delaying that college decision, and then serving, I mean, going to college later.
Absolutely. It's amazing. They put aside their rivalry. I mean, they all mix together. You wouldn't know who the Auburn students and Alabama students are. Some of them wear the jerseys, but they all get along. There's a camaraderie there that's really heartening.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned veteran suicide, you mentioned mental health. What are some of the new or maybe ongoing services at the department dealing with veterans that we should be aware of?
We're doing a lot. We've got a lot of projects going on. We are building a 5th state veterans home, a long-term care facility down in Enterprise. It is on track. We expect to open that home in the summer of 2024. That'll assist with a backlog, frankly, that we have in long-term care for veterans in the state of Alabama. So we're really looking forward to that. We're also doing a major expansion of our state veterans cemetery down in Spanish Fort. That project should be finished in December. We'll add about 4,000 burial plots in that cemetery. We have just converted our dependent scholarship program, which is another thing Alabama should be proud of. We have a great dependent scholarship program in Alabama that's unique to the state that provides scholarships for the dependents of selected disabled veterans. We've just taken that program online. It used to be a paper-based application. Now there's a portal that applicants can go in, very easy, much more efficient. There's also something happening at the federal level that's of benefit to veterans. For about a year, we've been talking about a new act called the Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxics Act, or the PACT Act. It's been in effect for over a year now, which has helped Vietnam veterans, Desert Storm, Iraq, and Afghanistan veterans who suffered the health consequences of toxic exposures.
Okay.
We've gotten a lot of claims that we've helped process under that new act. There's an even newer law called the Compact Act, which is aimed at mental health and veteran suicide prevention. And it basically allows a veteran to go to a civilian emergency medical facility if they're in some type of crisis, a mental health crisis, and get assistance there, and the federal VA will pick up the tab for that. This is a huge development, so a veteran does not have to wait to go to the federal VA to seek assistance. They can go to their nearest emergency room, for example, and get immediate assistance. That's on top of all of the other mental health initiatives we have going on with many partners, from the Alabama Department of Mental Health to Public Health to the federal VA to Health and Human Services. There really is a nationwide partnership to address this issue.
Yeah, that is a big deal because, I mean, you may not live anywhere close to a VA facility. I know
That's
that
right.
they've expanded those, but, I mean, and it's been a civilian issue here in Alabama. They've been popping up mental health crisis centers throughout the state, so those would qualify, I'm guessing, too.
Absolutely. So a little over a year ago, we rolled out across the nation the 988 crisis line. The Alabama Department of Mental Health has been a good partner with that, and that applies to veterans also. You dial 988 and then dial 1, and it gets you specialized veteran services.
Oh, I didn't know that. So
Absolutely.
there's a special dedicated line.
There is, and that will link that veteran up with specialized services just for veterans, because there are some unique issues for veterans, PTSD, traumatic
Absolutely.
brain injury. But the Compact Act, the new federal law, gives even more help, where if you need to go to a facility and get immediate assistance, this Compact Act will allow you to do that at the nearest emergency facility.
That is great news, and we will want to highlight that in the months and weeks to come. I wanted to go back to the home there in Enterprise, because I know it's moving along. You said there's a backlog, almost sounds like a waiting list. Who is the type of veteran that qualifies for something like that?
So the range of services we provide are everything from assisted living services through skilled nursing care through what we call memory care for Alzheimer's and dementia residents. Typically we're talking elderly or severely disabled veterans that are residents of our homes. Right now our homes are in such demand, we do have a waiting list to get into all 4 of the homes, and it can be quite lengthy in some of the newer homes. Our new home in Enterprise will help alleviate a big part of that waiting list, so we are really looking forward to that asset coming online.
Absolutely. I hope you'll have a ribbon cutting, and we'll be down there.
We will. We're going to have a ribbon cutting for our cemetery expansion probably in February of 2024, and then sometime in late summer of 2024 we're tentatively planning a big grand opening of the new Command Sergeant Major Benny G. Atkins State Veterans Home in Enterprise.
How about that? I didn't realize that was going to be the name. A Medal of Honor winner.
Another Alabama hero.
Absolutely.
Medal of Honor recipient with deep, deep Alabama ties.
Absolutely. Wow, that's really cool. Well, look, appreciate you coming on the show. Look forward to all these developments. And let me say, thank you for your service.
Thanks so much, Todd. That means a lot. It really does.
We'll be right back.
In 1947, Birmingham resident and Navy veteran Raymond Weeks led a delegation to Washington, D.C. to request General Eisenhower's support for changing Armistice Day to Veterans Day to honor those who served in World War II. With Eisenhower's blessing, Weeks returned to Birmingham and started what is the nation's oldest and largest Veterans Day parade. Each November 11th, thousands packed downtown streets and sidewalks to thank our soldiers for their service and sacrifice.
Joining me next is John Barganier, the newly named President and CEO of Manufacture Alabama. John, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Thank you for having me, Todd. I appreciate what y'all do, informing the public of Alabama on the important issues in the capital city.
Well, thanks, and congratulations to you. News came out this week that you're the newly named President and CEO. Obviously, George Clark had been there for, 27 years, something like that, so congratulations. I was hoping that you could remind our audience about Manufacture Alabama and its role in the state.
Yeah, Manufacture Alabama was founded in the mid-90s. It was originally the Alabama Industries and Manufacturers Association. It evolved into what it is now, which is Manufacture Alabama. George Clark, my predecessor, he founded the organization and really set the foundation and the structure for what we have now. And I credit a lot of success in the workforce development arena, economic development arena, and manufacturing to him. But we're a traditional trade association. We represent hundreds of manufacturing companies across the state. We also have partner members that conduct business with industries in the different sectors. And yeah, we're just blessed. I like to say that manufacturing is a representative of what the good things of Alabama are. It's hardworking men and women. It's an economic impact of $40 billion a year, 270,000 plus employees across the state. So it's putting food on the table for folks in all the communities across the state. So we're very blessed. We have challenges. That's why we're there, and we advocate on behalf of manufacturing companies with legislative leadership, the governor, our congressional delegation, and we want people to know more about the great opportunities with careers in manufacturing.
Mm-hmm. Well, right, because in this building, I see you and your member companies visiting the legislature. Also remember y'all coming to Washington, D.C., visiting Congress, not just you and representatives, but actual manufacturers themselves coming to Congress and sharing about whatever's going on with the delegation.
Yeah, we think it's important that leaders have real-time feedback on the issues that these large job creators have. And so we do value our relationships here in Montgomery and in D.C., but we have a business-friendly environment in Alabama. We don't take that for granted. So we work hard every day to make sure that the policy and decision makers have the best information they can to continue to enhance the growth of economic development in the state, and in particular the manufacturers. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You mentioned George Clark, like I said, been there for 27 years, kind of an institution there, has now retired. Talk about that legacy and maybe building on it.
Yeah, those are big shoes to fill. There's no doubt about it. George has been a staple here in this town for decades. His focus, and it seems like to me his life's mission was to focus on the best trained and skilled workers that the industry could have. And so he's really honed in on the workforce development initiatives over the years. He has cultivated a remarkable relationship with the Alabama Community College System, which has paid dividends for our members across the state. And we have a wonderful working relationship with Chancellor Baker and the community college presidents. And our members really tap into those resources for finding workers, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the labor shortage issues, but they're a key partner in that, and I credit George for that, and all the success we've had to this point. George should get a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into labor participation rates, and because I know of the many issues that y'all are dealing with here lately, here the last couple of years. It's been this workforce participation rate. Alabama has one of the lowest in the country at just 57%, and so you've got low unemployment, yes, but too few Alabamians, not enough Alabamians are deciding to participate in the workforce. It's a problem for everybody. I mean, your member companies need workers. So I know it's not just y'all. There are plenty of organizations out there trying to fix this. So what are some of the ways that the state can help address this problem?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying I'd flip that number of 57% on its head and emphasize the number of 43%. We really have 43% of our working age population who are not actively looking for jobs, or they have barriers, right, to getting a job. And so we spend a lot of our time as an association talking to hiring managers, HR professionals in the industry to ask, what are your issues? What are the problems? What can we help try to provide solutions for? And we obviously have seen all the help wanted signs throughout this state. We hear about it from hiring managers. We hear that small businesses have a hard time finding employees. So we wanted to go a level deeper. What are the barriers? What are you hearing from job applicants? And we hear of two barriers in particular that we feel like we have to address. One is in the realm of transportation. A lot of us take transportation for granted. But in rural areas, lower income individuals, transportation is not always a given. And so getting people to and from a workplace is something we've got to figure out how to provide more opportunities for those individuals that want to work. So that's one barrier. The second barrier, and this is the one we're honing in on for this year as an association, is the child care aspect. We hear about that a lot from hiring managers when they're talking to applicants, in particular single working moms or single working dads for that matter, or dual income younger families. When they come in and ask about benefits, time off, what the nature of the work is, a lot of times they'll ask the question, do you offer a child care option? I need a child care option so that I can actually come to work. And that's becoming a real hot issue. It's national. I'm seeing articles all the time about the child care issue. And it stems from a couple of things. Child care is expensive.
Yeah.
The costs have risen. Think about it this way. A young couple, they've been in the workforce for a few years. They decide they want to start a family, and then they have to have that conversation about, well, are we both going back to work? What are we going to do with our baby? Both of them may want to go back to work. They start assessing the child care options in their community. They start looking at the costs, and they do like what we all do, which is get to the kitchen table and budget it all out. And it may not be cost prohibitive for one of the members of the household to keep working just to send their salary right to that daycare provider. And so, we're trying to figure out ways, out of the box solutions to offer that won't end up with one of those two individuals leaving the workforce. We need to retain what we have, but we also have to do something to increase our labor force participation rate and bring new people into the workforce. And we feel like an incentive to business that would offer child care as a benefit to their employee, just like they offer retirement or health care, is a way to move the needle, especially with the newer generation of workers coming up. And we have to have those folks. So we've crafted a piece of legislation that's a tax credit that a business would receive if they offer child care as a benefit to the employee. The tax credit would come in the form of a one-to-one offering. If the business offers X amount of dollars to the employee, they would get a tax credit back at the end of the year, and that incentivizes the business to get into it. And the legislature will ultimately determine, based on fiscal impacts, what that kind of percentage is in terms of a tax credit. But we are a manufacturing trade association. Child care is not our bread and butter, right? So we were able to create a very unique and productive relationship and partnership with the Women's Foundation of Alabama. Melanie Bridgeforth and her team up there in Birmingham have come on board, and we've been working with them for about the 18 months or so now to come up with this legislation. We looked at other states. About 23 other states have some sort of tax credit for businesses that offer child care. And like we typically like to do, we try to find the best aspects of those laws and craft an Alabama model, and that's what we have. And we have really strong leadership with Representative Anthony Daniels, House Minority Leader. I know he's been here to talk about this.
Yeah.
He's all over the state talking about it and an active supporter of this issue. Senator Garland Gudger is our Senate sponsor. Senator Gudger has done an amazing job getting up to speed on this issue and is very supportive of what we're trying to do. I am encouraged, Todd, that we always focused on unemployment rate for so many years, you know that, and now we're at 2.1%. But that is not the meaningful measure of a productive workforce. And so Governor Ivey, Speaker Ledbetter, Pro Tem Marsh, Lieutenant Governor Ainsworth, they're all working in concert to try to see what we can do to move that labor force participation rate from 57% to something. Every percentage we can move that needle is thousands of jobs in Alabama. So that's thousands of families with good paying opportunities. It's hundreds of companies with the employees they need. It's an increased tax base, and it's an increased economic impact to the state. So we feel like this is a true win-win at the end of the day for the state, for the employees, and for the businesses. And we're just grateful for this synergy that's being created by the leadership in the state and the public and private partnership we have.
Yeah, it's a big issue to watch come session. I think you're going to have a lot of agreement. And you're right about the participation rate versus the unemployment rate. I mean, we've both worked in governor's offices. It's easy to just send out that press release and tout really good news. Hey, look at it, it's the record low unemployment. But it was a few months ago that the governor was purposeful and intentional about, no, we're going to focus on this because this is the problem. And I think that's pretty bold. You talked about Leader Daniels. He also had this bill dealing with overtime and taking the state's portion of income tax off of overtime, essentially a pay raise for a lot of wage workers. I mean, this is your workforce.
No doubt.
That will go into effect in January, so it hasn't happened yet. But have you heard from your members about, like, you know, are they excited about their workers getting that pay raise?
Yeah, there's a lot of optimism around that law, and I would like to commend Representative Daniels for that because it's a novel idea. No other state has adopted a law like that, and I expect to see a lot of legislatures across the country start to look at that, look at Alabama as the model. But yes, at the end of the day, as a supplement to this labor shortage that we have, there are individuals who are putting in a lot of time and a lot of overtime. This law puts more money in their pockets, and it's going to encourage other individuals to put more hours in, to put more money in their pockets. And so it does help supplement that shortage we have of a lack of incoming workers. I actually believe that it can encourage some that are sitting on the sidelines to maybe come back into the workforce, knowing that if they work overtime, it's not going to be taxed by the state. And again, it's increased wages at the end of the day. So it has been well received. Our member companies are working closely with, like, the Department of Revenue. Commissioner Barnett and his team have done an amazing job because it does change some things of how a company, you know, would report on tax filings and that nature, especially when it comes to their hourly wage employees and the overtime they work. So we're creating those conversations to make sure the companies understand, and especially those in the payroll tax role in the business, understand how they'll administer this. And we're very encouraged by Governor Ivey. Her leadership, she has made it clear she doesn't want to put an undue burden on businesses with this bill as it relates to more paperwork. And so we're encouraged, but we feel like, again, any of these out of the box kind of ideas, novel ideas, this, childcare, these will move the needle. They're not all a silver bullet, but again, if we can move that labor force participation rate by just 1%, that's thousands of new jobs. So we're excited about everything we see going on in the state.
They actually had a ceremonial bill signing out at Hyundai, and we're going to go to that in a second. But thanks again for coming on Capital Journal. Congratulations on being named President and CEO, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it.
And now out to Hyundai Motor Manufacturing for the ceremonial bill signing of the state's income tax cut on overtime wages.
Well, it's going to be important because Alabama workers that are working overtime hours will be able to receive a 5% pay raise on every hour that they work in overtime. 5% at time and a half is a lot better than 5% of base pay. And so if it's time and a half, that 5% is much more impactful than it would be at the first 40 hours. And so this incentivizes individuals to work a little extra. We're coming up on Christmas, and families are looking to be able to bring in more money. It'll give them an opportunity next year. It'll give them an opportunity starting the year in January, an opportunity to be able to bring in more money so that they can save more money for Christmas time, or other priorities that they may have during the year. So a 5% pay raise without your employer having to give it to you is a win-win situation for our Alabamians as well as those families that are impacted. So whenever a person, an hourly worker, makes more money, they spend more money. We know from studies that there's spending habits of individuals that make more money. So when they spend more money, you'll start to see local municipalities will be able to receive more tax revenue, counties will be able to receive more tax revenue, and the state. So you're not, when you look at the overall cost, the benefits outweigh the liability.
Before we go, I wanted to offer an update on the growing list of congressional candidates in Alabama's newly redrawn 2nd Congressional Districts. 14 candidates have qualified thus far. There's still a few more hours left for candidates to qualify, but here is the growing list. On the Democratic side, James Everhard, Napoleon Bracey, Anthony Daniels, Wandalyn Gavan, Jeremy Gray, Phyllis Harvey Hall, Willie Leonard, Shamari Figures, Vimal Patel, and Larry Darnell Simpson. And on the Republican side, Greg Albritton, Dick Brubaker, Caroline Dobson, Carla Dupriest, and Hampton Harris. So again, there's still a few hours to qualify, but 14 candidates so far have qualified in that newly redrawn 2nd Congressional District. That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.